Välkommen allesammans, coming at you from Copenhagen today, but the previous videos that I'm going to be showing you here in the background are from back home in Norway. Come to the end of my trip and have been to these two beautiful countries now, and these two places make a whole lot of sense to film here for what I'm going to talk about. It is how the Vikings, how the Germanic peoples, how everyone else basically survived their collapses and any kind of crises that came their way. So the worst collapses that have happened in history, and as well as any kind of disasters or collapses that will come in the future, it has to do with the food, right? If there's enough food for people, it's relatively safe, it's a relatively good economy, relatively peaceful and comfortable place in history to live. But sometimes something happens, sometimes the climate changes, sometimes there are disasters, sometimes there are famines, sometimes there are things that just make it so that food doesn't grow. Especially in Scandinavia, this is a very big problem since it's very, very cold already and very little things grow there as it is. That makes it even more difficult if there is a substantial temperature drop, so the winter it turns out to be 9 months out of the year instead of 6 like it is normally. And this is really what has been the cause of all the collapses that the Scandinavians have faced throughout history. The most famous one and massive scale was the migration period, as you know, massive temperature drops. Scandinavians had to migrate south. But these kinds of things also happened again. It happened to some extent in the Viking Age, even though that was not really a disaster. It was actually a warming period, but it was still a huge population boom in the Viking period, and they needed some other places to settle because there was not enough food. Another one that came in the 1300s, 1400s was a cooling period, and that lasted for 400 or 500 years. And that was again a time where many Scandinavians could not feed themselves and they migrated elsewhere. So like I said, I'm making this video from Denmark and Norway is because Norway does not even produce 50% of the food they need to feed their population. They bring most of it in from abroad, and a lot of it comes from here in Denmark. Denmark has always been a place that has been a little more stable with their food sources over history, but all of Scandinavia in general has a very hard time. You know, the colder things are, the less things grow. But I'm showing you some videos here. This is a very big misconception, and you will be very, very surprised that in the forests in Norway, like I'm showing you in these videos, it is full of life. It is full of cherries, berries, nuts at the right time of year, apples, all these kinds of fruits. And then as we get into the autumn, it comes to be mushrooms and things like that. So really, I'm showing you just a few quick clips here. You can go to my second channel, The Seasonal Diet, and I will give a full breakdown of my foraging that I did in Norway here. But basically, you can't even walk a minute or two through a forest in Norway without finding tons of berries or things to eat. So it is really, for most of the year, not a big problem to feed yourself in the Scandinavian countries. You could really, from May until October, live completely off of foraged things, and you can do completely fine. And there's also so much life there with birds and animals for hunting. So that is not the problem. Problem comes in the winter, of course, and nothing grows then. What do we do? Well, first of all, as I speak about on my other channel, The Seasonal Diet, this changes to a period where we eat a bit more meat. But even then, livestock can be very, very difficult to have and take care of and maintain in any kind of collapses or disasters that Scandinavia has faced in previous years in history. But there is one thing that is always, or has always been, a reliable food source, and that is fish. Fish, fresh oceans. This has been the only thing that has kept Scandinavia alive through the thousands of years. No matter what happens with the foraging or the fruits or vegetables found in Scandinavia or the livestock, or if there's big famines, things like that, the sea has always been right next to us as a valuable, valuable food source. The Scandinavians are a seafaring people. They always have been and always will be. And you can see this even in some of the archaeological finds, and then later on in history where we have written records of these types of things. When collapses and famines start to happen, fish becomes a much bigger part of the diet because that's the only thing there. So the fish and the sea is basically, in my opinion, what has enabled Scandinavians to thrive and survive really over the thousands of years, even in a climate and in certain times and certain periods where it would not have been possible to survive otherwise. So super important. If you guys are into that thing, I am, preparing for any type of disaster, preparing for any types of collapses, it always is best to live near some body of water, preferably the ocean. If we do that and we make use of the ocean, like Scandinavians have done for thousands of years before, we will be okay too. Even if overfishing destroys the whole population of everything we eat in the ocean, there will still be some. It'll just be a bit hard to catch. You might not just be able to throw your line out there and fish for a couple minutes. You might have to be out there all day, but there is always other fish in the sea. And I wish that was an original Viking proverb, but yeah, I don't think it is. But anyway, hope you enjoyed. This is the last video on my trip. I will be getting back home in a couple days, and then it's back to the regular videos with the sources and kind of breakdowns like I usually do. But this is my last nature rant for a while. Hope you enjoyed. Vi ses nästa gång.